Finally, what we all have been waiting for and calling for and questioning why it wasn't happening. Stephanie White has stepped up to the plate in defense of Caitlin Clark. I could not believe my ears, guys. I could not believe my ears when I heard this. Stephanie White actually being bold enough to stand on business and protect Caitlin Clark.
It's a statement that sent shockwaves through the entire world of professional sports. A quiet, calculated truth bomb dropped not by a loudmouthed analyst or a furious player, but by a respected coach who had simply seen enough. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White stepped up to the microphone and did what no one else in the WNBA had the courage to do. She pulled back the curtain on the dark, manipulative game being played behind the scenes, and she exposed how one young superstar is being used as the ultimate pawn. She was bold enough to stand on business and speak a truth that everyone else is terrified to utter. And what she revealed wasn't just a defense of her player. It was a devastating diagnosis of a league on the verge of full-blown collapse.
And it is Stephanie White talking about Caitlin Clark being brought up in a lot of these conversations in CBA by other people and not her speaking herself. And I think this is a really interesting one. And it's clear from this answer, I've already listened to this, it's very clear from this answer that Stephanie White clearly and Caitlin Clark, there's clearly a level of person, like they clearly really like each other.
This isn't just about basketball anymore. This is about power, jealousy, and a leadership that has completely lost its way. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why Stephanie White's words are the most important thing to happen to the WNBA this entire season, and why the league's future now hangs in the balance. It all started with a simple question from a reporter, a question about the constant, never-ending dialogue that seems to follow one player everywhere she goes. And Coach White's response was calm, authoritative, and absolutely devastating. She said, and I quote, "I hate it all for Caitlin. She's a 23-year-old kid who loves to play this game, and she's a pawn in a lot of other people's games. Let that word sink in for a moment. A pawn, not a partner, not a colleague. A pawn, a piece to be moved, sacrificed, and used for the advantage of others. And when you break it down, White isn't just talking about one group. She's calling out an entire ecosystem of exploitation. The league itself uses Caitlin Clark as a pawn to sell tickets and secure sponsorships, plastering her face on every promo while failing to protect her on the court."
And then Caitlin Clark kind of getting brought into that, Caitlin Clark responding to it. What has been your overall assessment of that dialogue and as it relates to your star player?
Yeah, I mean, I hate it all for Caitlin. I feel like, she's a 23-year-old kid who loves to play this game, who is a pawn in a lot of other people's games and a lot of other people's narratives, and I hate that for her. We're coming into a time in the WNBA where we're kind of part of the growing pains of becoming quote-unquote mainstream professional sport.
Other players use her as a pawn in their collective bargaining arguments, dragging her name into debates about salaries and respect even when she herself remains completely silent. And the media uses her as a pawn for clicks and engagement, turning her every expression and every loss into a week-long controversy. The wildest part in all of this? Caitlin Clark has barely uttered a single controversial word all season long. She's handled the relentless physical hits and the constant verbal attacks with almost superhuman composure. She's the one living in the eye of the hurricane, yet she's not the one creating the storm. Stephanie White sees this clearly. She sees a young woman who just wants to play the game she loves, a 23-year-old who should be focused on perfecting her craft, not navigating a political minefield designed by everyone around her. This is the heartbreaking reality of being the chosen one in a league that doesn't know what to do with its own success.
Saying what it is, these people are using Caitlin Clark. They're disrespecting.
But what makes this confession so explosive isn't just the sentiment, it's the source. Stephanie White isn't a hot-headed analyst on a debate show. She's not a player in the heat of a rivalry. She is the head coach of the Indiana Fever, a respected veteran of the game, and her words carry the weight of someone speaking forbidden truth from the inside. This wasn't an off-the-cuff remark. It was a deliberate, calculated assessment delivered with a chilling calmness that made it all the more powerful.
You think that we are at a pivotal moment in terms of the league's history. And look, I was a part of the very first collective bargaining agreement of the WNBA, where we wanted insurance all year long, to now where it is growing and players do deserve more. And leadership needs to reflect where we are as a league, and also understand where we are as a league and where players' perspectives are coming from. And, you know, we have coaches on the sidelines, and Becky Hammond and myself, and of course Noah Upland, who was in Seattle, who played in this league.
In that moment, she wasn't just a coach protecting her player. She was a whistleblower exposing a deeply broken system. And the fact that she felt the need to say this out loud, knowing the firestorm would ignite, tells you everything you need to know about how severe the situation behind the scenes has truly become. The mask of league-wide unity has officially been ripped off, and what's left is a raw, unfiltered look at the internal conflict that's been boiling over for months. But to really understand the gravity of White's statement, you have to look beyond the Indiana Fever locker room. You have to see the full-scale rebellion erupting across the entire WNBA. This is an isolated opinion. It's a symptom of a deep, festering infection within the league structure. Just weeks ago, veteran star Nneka Ogwumike went off on Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, accusing her of terrible leadership and claiming that Engelbert had suggested Caitlin Clark should just be grateful for the WNBA platform. That's not just a complaint. That's an accusation of fundamental disrespect for the very athletes who drive the league. Then came Sophie Cunningham, who didn't hold back at all, publicly labeling Engelbert the most delusional leader the league has ever seen. Lexi Brown backed her up. Even legendary coaches like Becky Hammond have thrown subtle shade at the league's officiating and decision-making. There's a mutiny happening in plain sight. The players, the lifeblood of the sport, are in open revolt against the people in charge. They feel ignored, disrespected, and undervalued. And into this firestorm steps Stephanie White, a coach who commands respect, adding her voice to the chorus of discontent. When someone as measured and calm as White speaks out, you know the situation is dire. This isn't just drama for drama's sake. This is a collective cry for help from the people who are on the front lines every single night. The pattern is undeniable. It's a cascade of frustration, with each new voice adding another layer to the story. It's not just about one comment or one incident. It's about a consistent pattern of behavior from the league's leadership that has left both players and coaches feeling alienated. When you have stars from different teams with different backgrounds and different career trajectories, all saying the same thing, it's no longer a coincidence. It's a consensus. They are united in their belief that the current leadership is failing them. And in the center of this storm, Caitlin Clark's name is a constant reference point, the human symbol of the league's explosive growth and its subsequent identity crisis. She became the easiest target, the shorthand for every argument about privilege, marketability, and the changing landscape of the sport. But as White pointed out, she's not the one having these debates. She's the subject being debated, a piece on a chessboard where she never asked to play. So, who is the target of all this frustration? The common thread in every one of these explosions leads directly to one person, WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, a former CEO brought in to run the league like a business, but according to her critics, a leader who has completely forgotten the human element of the game. Her tenure has been marked by what players describe as tone-deaf, robotic, and downright dismissive responses to their very real concerns. When the Caitlin Clark officiating controversy was at its peak, the league was silent until public pressure forced them to issue a weak statement. When players like Ogwumike and Cunningham publicly eviscerate her leadership, Engelbert releases a generic, disheartened press release that does nothing to address the core issues. Stephanie White alluded to this leadership vacuum perfectly when she said, "Leadership needs to reflect where we are as a league." That's a polite way of saying the people at the top are stuck in the past. Engelbert operates like a corporate executive managing a spreadsheet, not a commissioner championing her players. She'll happily take credit for the soaring ratings that Caitlin Clark delivered, but she seems utterly bewildered when it comes to handling the jealousy, the internal politics, and the basic player safety that comes with that new spotlight. The players see a leader who is all public relations talk and no genuine action. They see a businesswoman who doesn't understand basketball culture, and in a sport built on passion and authenticity, that disconnect is a fatal flaw. Her background as a former Deloitte CEO was initially seen as a strength, a sign that the league was ready to be run as a serious business. But that corporate mindset has backfired spectacularly. You can't manage human emotion, competitive fire, and decades of institutional struggle with a PowerPoint presentation and a quarterly earnings report. The players aren't employees in a cubicle. They are world-class athletes with platforms and voices. Engelbert's approach has been to try and monetize the league's new momentum without first putting out the internal fires, and the result is a staff rebellion. Her now infamous comment about Clark's off-court earnings, suggesting she shouldn't expect the league to just hand her anything, was a catastrophic misread of the room. It sounded less like a defense of the WNBA's pay structure and more like a dismissal of her own league's most valuable asset. In that one moment, she confirmed every player's fear that the leadership views them not as partners, but as liabilities on a balance sheet. What makes Stephanie White's perspective so powerful and so damning for the league's current leadership is that she isn't just an observer. She's a living witness to the entire history of the WNBA. She was there at the very beginning, fighting in the first collective bargaining agreements for fundamental necessities like year-round health insurance and a livable wage. She remembers when players were just thrilled to have a professional league to play in. So when she describes the current chaos as the growing pains of becoming a mainstream professional sport, she's speaking from a place of immense authority. She knows what real struggle looks like. She's seen the league when it was on life support. And her point is crucial. This growth was inevitable, but it's being mismanaged. She understands that players now rightly demand a larger piece of the pie and more control over their careers. But she also sees that the leadership is completely unprepared for this new reality. White represents the bridge between the old guard and the new era. She fought for the foundation that today's players are building upon, which is why her defense of Caitlin Clark and her criticism of the league's direction carries so much weight. It's not the complaint of someone who doesn't understand the business. It's the wisdom of someone who understands the business better than anyone and sees it being run into the ground. She embodies the entire journey of the WNBA. She knows the sacrifices made to get a seat at the table, and now she's watching as the current leadership seems to be fumbling the moment they've all been waiting for. Her use of the term growing pains is both an explanation and an indictment. It's an explanation for fans who are confused by the constant drama, assuring them that some turmoil is natural. But it's a searing indictment of the leadership, because growing pains are supposed to be managed and learned from, not ignored and exacerbated. When Stephanie White, who fought for health insurance, says that the current leadership isn't reflecting where the league is, it means they are failing the very legacy she helped build. They are squandering the platform that she and her contemporaries blaze a trail to create. Her voice isn't just another opinion. It's the voice of the league's conscience, and it's saying that the soul of the WNBA is in jeopardy. There's a deeply insidious side to this entire situation, a form of exploitation that's almost invisible unless you know where to look. It's the way the WNBA simultaneously markets Caitlin Clark as its golden child while throwing her to the wolves. Think about it. Her face is on every advertisement. Her name is mentioned every 5 seconds during broadcasts. She is, without question, the league's #1 marketing strategy. They use her image to project an image of growth and success to sponsors and fans. But when she gets hammered by a cheap shot on court, the league's response is slow and hesitant. When she becomes a target of vile online hate and internal jealousy, the leadership offers little more than weak statements. They are using her fame as a shield to cover up their own glaring failures. They want the benefits she brings without the responsibility of protecting her. This is the core of the pawn narrative. She's the asset they leverage for profit, but not the human being they defend with principle. This hypocrisy is not lost on the fans. They can see the league using Clark's image to sell tickets 1 minute, and then failing to defend her integrity the next. This kind of short-sighted manipulation is incredibly dangerous. It might generate money in the short term, but it erodes the trust of the audience. Fans start to feel like they're watching a reality show full of manufactured drama, rather than a legitimate sports league dedicated to its athletes and its game. When the business side consumes everything, the soul of the sport dies. This creates a bizarre and unsustainable duality for Clark herself. On one hand, she is the league's most prominent ambassador, the face of a new era. On the other hand, within the ecosystem of the league, she is often treated as an outsider, a disruptor whose success is somehow a slight against the established veterans. The league office fuels this by centering their entire marketing push around her, which inadvertently fuels the resentment that other players feel, creating a vicious cycle that they then refuse to mediate or address. It's a no-win situation for everyone. Clark can't win because she's set up to be resented. The veterans can't win because their legitimate grievances about pay and respect get lost in a narrative that seems to pit them against a rookie. And the fans definitely can't win because they're sold a product based on one player's stardom, only to see that same player and the league around her become engulfed in a drama that has nothing to do with basketball. The game itself becomes a secondary storyline, and that is the fastest way way to lose the credibility the WNBA has worked so hard to build. And this is where the WNBA's internal crisis becomes a crisis for everyone who loves a game. The constant off-court drama, the political battles, the war of words between players and the commissioner, it's all starting to overshadow the actual beauty of what's happening on the hardwood. We're in a golden era of women's basketball talent. The level of play is higher than it has ever been. We should be talking about incredible crossovers, deep three-pointers, and defensive masterclasses. Instead, the headlines are dominated by which player said what about the commissioner, or which coach called out the league's hypocrisy. The fans are slowly losing. They tuned in for basketball, but they're being fed a never-ending soap opera. Stephanie White understands this better than anyone. Her message was so powerful because it was balanced. She wasn't just taking cheap shots. She was pleading for a return to what matters. She was defending her player while also subtly defending the league's potential future. She knows that the drama continues to be the main event. The casual fans who were drawn in by Caitlin Clark's brilliance will eventually click away. They'll get tired of the noise. They'll grow frustrated with a league that seems more interested in its own internal power struggles than in celebrating its own sport. The momentum that the WNBA has worked for decades to build is at risk of being squandered in a matter of months. But the real tragedy here is the sheer amount of brilliance being lost in the noise. Think about what we should be discussing. We have Aya Wilson delivering MVP caliber performances night after night, a force of nature in the post with a grace and power that is simply breathtaking. We have Breanna Stewart, a player with an unprecedented combination of size and skill, who can dominate a game in so many ways it's almost unfair. We have electric scoring of Jewel Lloyd, the veteran leadership of Diana Taurasi, and the rising stardom of Aaliyah Boston. The on-court narratives are richer and more compelling than ever before. We have fierce rivalries being born, epic comeback stories, and moments of pure, unadulterated athletic genius that can stop your heart. Yet, for the casual viewer, these stories are buried under an avalanche of think pieces about locker room dynamics and executive leadership. The conversation has been hijacked. The league's greatest season of visibility is being defined by its greatest season of internal conflict, and that is a catastrophic failure of storytelling and brand management. The product on the court is being betrayed by the chaos off of it. This creates a dangerous perception problem that is incredibly difficult to reverse. For the millions of new fans who discover the WNBA through Caitlin Clark, their first impression is not one of elite competition and sporting excellence, but of pettiness, infighting, and a seeming inability to embrace a rising tide that lifts all boats. They see a player being treated as an outsider in her own league. They see veterans who they should be learning to admire appearing to resent the very attention that is funding the league's growth. And they see a leadership structure that is either unwilling or unable to steer the ship back towards the game itself. This perception, whether entirely fair or not, is what drives viewer attention. People engage with sports for an escape, for the purity of competition, for the shared joy of witnessing greatness. When the off-court narrative becomes more complex, more exhausting, and more negative than the on-court action, the average fan will simply disengage. They don't have the time or energy to decode the political landscape of a sports league. They just want to watch great basketball. And right now, the league is making that incredibly difficult. Stephanie White's intervention was a desperate attempt to cut through this toxic fog. By calling out the pawn dynamic, she was trying to reframe the entire conversation. She was pointing a finger directly at the engine of the drama machine and begging for it to be shut off. Her plea was for the league to remember its core product, the game. Every minute spent arguing about Kathy Engelbert's leadership is a minute not spent promoting Aya Wilson's historic season. Every headline about a player's critical comments is a headline that isn't celebrating a game-winning shot. The league is in a battle for the cultural spotlight, a battle it has wanted to win for decades, and now that it has it, it's spending that precious capital on self-inflicted wounds. The players, who have sacrificed so much to reach this level, deserve to have their athletic achievements be the story. The fans, who are spending their time and money, deserve to enjoy those achievements without a constant background hum of negativity. The path forward is narrow, but it exists. It requires a fundamental shift from the top down. It requires leadership that can simultaneously manage the legitimate business growth and protect the sanctity of the game. It means having a commissioner who can stand before the cameras and, instead of giving a corporate non-answer, can genuinely celebrate the players, all the players, and forcefully redirect the narrative back to the breathtaking basketball being played. It means creating an environment where Caitlin Clark's success is seen as a victory for the entire league, not a threat, and where veterans like Nneka Ogwumike are heard and respected without having to launch public rebellions. This isn't about choosing one player over another. It's about choosing the game above all else. The WNBA is standing at the most critical juncture in its history. It can continue down this path of internal combustion, watching as the goodwill of a new generation of fans slowly evaporates. Or it can heed the warning of voices like Stephanie White, clean house at the leadership level, and finally give the beautiful game itself the center stage it has so rightfully earned. The choice they make now will define the league for the next 20 years. What happens next is ultimately in their hands, but the world is watching and their patience is not unlimited. So where does this leave us? Stephanie White's interview wasn't just a coach defending her superstar. It was a warning delivered with calm clarity from someone who has seen the WNBA at its worst and is now watching it risk its best chance at a mainstream future. She defended Caitlin Clark not just as a player, but as a person. And in doing so, she was fundamentally defending the integrity of the league itself. The central question she posed, without ever saying it directly, is this: will the WNBA learn from these growing pains, or will it allow its current leadership to turn these cracks into full-blown fractures? The players are speaking. The coaches are speaking. The fans are speaking through their viewership and their social media comments. The message is unified. The current path is unsustainable. If the league continues to treat its biggest star as a pawn, if it continues to ignore the voices of its athletes, and if it continues to be led by a tone-deaf business strategy, instead of a bold basketball vision, then it won't just be Caitlin Clark who eventually walks away from the chaos. It will be the millions of new fans who finally gave the WNBA a chance, only to be disappointed by a league that didn't know how to handle its own success. The ball is now in the league's court. The truth has been exposed. The only thing left to see is what they decide to do with it. What are your thoughts? Is Stephanie White absolutely right about the WNBA's current leadership? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into the real story behind the WNBA's chaos as shocking as I did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next expose. Thanks for watching.